I first heard the legend of Tailypo as a child when I checked out a book on tape by David Holt from the library. The story has been one of my favorites ever since. Over the years, I've seen different adaptations of the tale, usually in books. Recently, Eric Powell even had Tailypo appear in his comic series, Hillbilly, which is really fun to read, by the way. I highly recommend it. One of the most striking takes on the Tailypo legend I've seen is a short film by Cameron McCasland. Cameron and I crossed paths on Twitter a few months ago. He told me about his film, and I was really impressed with it. There was something about watching this old favorite portrayed on a new medium that recaptured the feeling I had when I heard the story for the first time. Cameron was kind enough to agree to an interview. I had a great time talking with him about everything from folklore to H.P. Lovecraft and Cameron's most recent film project. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with a brilliant storyteller. Well, maybe you could just kind of start off with a little introduction about yourself, how you got into filmmaking and that for people that haven't heard of you or your movies yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Cameron McCasland. I grew up in East Texas, which is where I heard the Tailypo story for the first time when I was a little kid. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for the better part of 16 years now, and I kind of come out of the entertainment business, honestly. My mom was an actress. She did some small TV roles and things like that. She directed a lot of plays in Texas and things like that. But whenever I got to Nashville, I moved here really to be a musician, and it kind of was one of those things where wherever you're from, if you're really good at playing an instrument, you get to Nashville and you're not the best guy anymore. You just can't be. And so I kind of, messed around with different things. I managed a couple bands. I toured with some people, things like that. And I decided real quick that I didn't want to be stuck in a van with a bunch of smelly guys riding cross country all the time. And so I started just working on some independent films, some music videos, and everything else, just to really, trying to make a little bit extra money and trying to, just do something different that was creative. And over time, I just kind of figured out, I was like, well, I'm getting better at this all the time, and it's something I really enjoy doing. And so I just kept at it. Now I've been at it for, let's say, the better part of 15 years now, and it's, just in the last couple of years, I really feel like I've started to make a little bit of a headway where, by no means, like, do I walk in a grocery store and people stop me or anything like that, but whenever I go to film festivals, I talk to people and they're like, oh, I've seen your work, and I've, they're familiar with the things I've made, which is always like the goal whenever you're a storyteller is to get your stories heard. So
yeah,
that's kind of how I got here.
That's awesome, and you've actually done some work for some big name country musicians down there, haven't you? With the music videos and that.
Yeah, here in Nashville, I've done some stuff for like Big and Rich and Florida Georgia Line and a couple different acts like that. Just kind of did a whole bunch of stuff with Florida Georgia Line here in the last couple of years, and it's been good, man. And country music is funny because whenever I was a teenager, I was a lot of punk rock. If you would have told me, 15 years ago that I'd be making country music stuff, I would have told you, that you were crazy. But it kind of works in the sense that, like, for me, again, I came from a small town in Texas, so I'm able to find some honesty and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
It reminds me of people that I knew. So it's definitely not even the first thing that I pull to, but again, like living in Nashville, you kind of come to appreciate country music for what it is and kind of where its place is in American history, because it's like it's one of them, like, as far as American music goes, it's something that is all our own. It's pulled from a lot of places, but
yeah,
and it's influenced so many different, like, I would say that, like, right now, like, the country music they're making here in Nashville has a lot more to do with, like, rock and roll than it does, like, Hank Williams. Like, Florida Georgia Line has more in common with the Eagles than it does Hank Williams. That's my take on it anyway. Those guys might disagree.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. Kind of going back to the Tailypo story here, you mentioned that you heard it as a child. Do you remember the actual first time that you heard it?
I do, but it's a cloudy memory. I have two recollections of it, and I can kind of place it because I know who my school teachers were who told it to me. My kindergarten teacher was a woman named Carolyn Hooks, and my fourth grade teacher was a woman named Darlene McInturf. And it was one of those things where, like, when I was a little kid, they used to tell that story around Halloween. I want to say that there was I couldn't tell the author, but there was a book that came out in the mid-'80s. It was a version of the Tailypo story. There's been several people that have written it and rewritten it. But there was a book that came out around that time, which is what I'm sure that they were probably pulling from, that they would read to school kids. And it's funny now because I can't imagine them reading that to kids now. I mean, I've got two daughters in elementary school and junior high school, and I feel like a lot of parents would have had a conniption fit if they did something that's, scared a child as much as that scared me. But it always stuck with me. So, I would say I was probably about 5 or 6 years old the first time that I heard it. And, again, it's a little bit milky in the way that memories are in exactly the first telling. Like, I can remember how I felt more than remember the actual story. And I remember who told it to me, though I couldn't exactly give you the inflection. But my fourth grade teacher, like, I can remember, like, sitting on the carpet. I remember, like, her dimming the lights and reading the story to us around Halloween time. And it just kind of always, it was always in the back of my mind. It was always something that I wanted to make whenever I started, like, making films. But the thing about that story that I always thought was great is it's a short story. It's something that's it's quick, it punches real hard. And, for the longest time, like, I'd made a feature film called The Lashman, and it was like a slasher movie. And, it's like, when you make that stuff, like, the hope is always that you're able to get it out there and sell it and make, any kind of money back on it. That way you can continue to make, another film. Nobody's making independent films getting rich right now, but you always want to be self-sustaining. And short films are really hard because they don't make any money. And, I always thought, well, it's like I don't want to stretch this out into something long because I don't feel like the story necessitates it.
Sure.
But at the same time, like, it's like I want to be pure to the way that I felt, even though it's not like everything that I wrote. Like, it's kind of like it's a recollection of, like, here's the story as I remember it being heard, but at the same time, like, the character has his own name and his own place, and it draws from some different things that I had either witnessed, heard, or read in my lifetime to kind of pull that all together. So his voice is all his own, but the story is connected to the story that I think a lot of people heard, whenever they were kids. And I think it just all depends on how you recollect it in your mind. Like, whenever you heard it, you probably played it out differently than the way that I did. I've heard, and the cool thing about being out with the movie, like, at film festivals, is I've had so many people come up to me and say, "Oh, I heard this as a kid, but I heard it and there were 6 dogs." And, whenever I saw it, it was an old man with a beard kind of thing, and so, like, you hear all these different versions of it. And even found out that there was a couple other filmmakers who had made different versions of it before I ever touched on it. And it was really cool to talk to some of those people and kind of see their take on it versus the thing that we did with it.
That is neat. What do you think it is about Tailypo that's made it such a popular story?
Well, I think part of it is, again, I think it's, for me, anyways, it was just part of being a youth. And, like, I don't know, whenever you're that age, like, I feel like most kids are either scared of everything or they're scared of nothing at all. And I know for me, it was something that frightened me because the idea of being alone in the wilderness was scary to me anyways. And the idea of something coming up and creeping into, your house or your room or your bed, that's the kind of stuff that little kids fear. You know what I mean? It's like when you go to sleep and you're scared of the dark. I think as we get older, we forget, that we were ever scared of that kind of stuff. But just the idea of scared of being alone. So I think it touches on all those things that, like, if you're 5 years old, you don't want to be alone because you want to be around your mom. You don't want to sleep in the bed by yourself. You don't want, you're scared of whatever's under your bed kind of thing. And I think Tailypo hits all those stories, but it also, like, gives it a voice. Whereas, like, in your imagination, it's only what you've made up. And so, like, everybody's got a different monster under their bed, but you may not can place it or see it or whatever. With the Tailypo story, they tell you what it is. They tell you what it looks like. And to me, I think that's what connected, at that young age. And you just, I think anytime the first thing that scares you, you carry that with you, forever.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so at what point did you really decide that you were, going to turn this into a film, that you were going to go for it?
Well, just like I was saying before, it was one of those things where we didn't know if we made it a short film, we were we're never going to make anything off of this. But kind of a cool set of circumstances came up that allowed me to do it. In that, I work on a TV show here in Nashville called Dr. Gangrene's Creature Feature, and what that is it's like a late night monster movie kind of TV show where a mad scientist comes in and he hosts, old movies, things like Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But
like the Wolfman.
Yeah, exactly. So we made a made-for-TV movie a couple of years ago, and we had pretty good luck with that as far as it played on TV for a while, and then it went out to DVD, and they've always wanted us to put out another Dr. Gangrene movie. And so what we decided we could do was do some short films and then have him host it as, that way we could release it as a feature-length film on iTunes and on DVD and things like that. And Tailypo was kind of the first test subject to see, what we could put together in a small length of time. And we've been working on that kind of ever since. I'll go work on a music video, or I'll go work on a feature film, and then I'll come back and I'll make a short film, and we'll send it out to festivals and put it out to see. But ultimately, when we get them all finished, we're going to put it out collectively as one kind of like Creep Show, or something to that extent, where it's like an anthology film that all has a similar theme. As far as it's all horror themed, and it's all family friendly to a certain extent.
Okay.
As opposed to the slasher film that I made, which is, I love it a lot, but it's there's sex and a lot of profanity and all the things that make that kind of movie good. That's not the kind of stuff that you're going to show to a certain audience. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think Tailypo is a lot more universally my kids can watch it, and I feel okay with that, even though it is scary. But someone like you or I could watch it, and we can enjoy it on a different level, at our age. And so, it was cool to kind of work within doing something that was horror related, but at the same time, kind of having some ground rules to say okay, we can do this, but we're going to watch how far we go with certain aspects of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, kind of along those lines, I've noticed that there are certain stories. Tailypo's one of them. Legend of Sleepy Hollow is another one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Where they're horror stories in a way, but they do really kind of reach far beyond the horror audience. There's people that don't watch horror movies that still enjoy those. And they kind of tap into that universal childhood fear. And so when you're looking to tell a story like that, is there a certain approach that you take to kind of tap into that primal childhood fear versus the more I don't know, kind of shock scares that you get in the other horror movies?
Well, I know for me, it's I always try to find something that's personal in everything that I make. But Tailypo was super easy because, like I said, it was something that I remember, that frightened me. I think that anytime you're doing horror, just like you said, there's certain people they write, they don't like horror movies, and I get that because there's a certain amount of, I don't know, it can be violent, it can be bloody, it can be overly sexualized. There's a lot of reasons that people, for just they have different tastes, they're I don't want the brain, and that makes perfect sense to me, why they wouldn't want to do that. But I think, again, if you can touch on things that are universally frightening, just like we were talking about with, something that they can recall, it's usually a lot of people, they love Alfred Hitchcock movies, but they don't like Freddy Krueger movies. You know what I mean? An Alfred Hitchcock movie can frighten you. It can scare you, but it's not, you don't go into it worried that you're going to be grossed out. And I think that's one of the main differences. So I know for us, there's there's very little gore in our movie. There's a lot of teeth and a lot of claws, but there's not a lot of actual blood and guts. You don't see that. It's more the idea of like make people feel it more than let them see it. And so I think that's just primal. You know what I mean? It's the first thing that everybody's scared of is the dark, and you grow out of that, but you also, you know, I'm sure everybody, even in their adult life, if you walk on a certain street at a certain time of night, you know, it's like, and the wind blows a certain way, it can get into your, you know, into your bones a little bit and kind of make you shiver because, like, it's the fear of the unknown. And I think that's what we were trying to do, and I think that's what any good story like that does.
For sure, yeah. I think that's a great way of looking at it. You know that I think that you really put your finger on something there. It being really about the feeling, you know, and the things that we all have felt. You know, who hasn't you know, felt alone in the dark as a little kid, you know, at some point. So Tailypo has won a lot of awards. And was that something that you ever anticipated when you were filming it? Has it exceeded your expectations?
It absolutely has exceeded my expectations. I don't know, man. It's weird because like you never do anything creative for the sake of winning an award. I think that's, you know, that's a dishonest way to do things. But at the same time, it's like it's always good for the movie. So like you submit it to film festivals and you try to get it out there. And, you know, it's the hope of like, well, if you take something home prize-wise, it helps you go to another place. And with Tailypo, we were super fortunate that it had a really good run to start up, you know, right out the gate. And because of that, it carried it because it's been streaming now for about 2 years, I guess. Like from the first time that it actually screened publicly up until now, it's like we're playing at a film festival next month in Fort Wayne, Indiana, called the Hobnobbin Film Festival, and that more than likely will be its last like theatrical, you know, thing. It's up online. You can watch it, you know, there, but we still get asked for it every you know, like just about every month since it's come out. Somebody has called and said, "Hey, we'd like to show this here," and we're happy to let them have it. But we kind of at this point, everybody that wanted to play it has had an opportunity because film festival cycles run a year at a time. And so it ran, you know, the first year, and then everything that we missed, you know, we were sent into, or, you know, we were invited on the second, you know, pass around. So going into the next year, I doubt there was going to be much more for it to play out publicly, but we did have a really cool run. We won some really cool prizes. It got nominated for an Emmy. We won the Rondo Hatton Award, which is a big horror award. You have to play. The coolest thing for me was like it got to play at a drive-in theater, and we played between the Goonies and the original Nightmare on Elm Street, which it was just a really fun night.
Perfect.
Yeah. Kind of be out in the open, and both of those movies were movies that I liked when I was younger, so it was just kind of a really cool sandwich to be in the middle of. So yeah.
That is just that just gave me shivers thinking about watching Tailypo in a drive-in. Like how awesome! So when you were writing the film, did you do a lot of research into the origins of the story and that, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, I did. Other than like, what I try to stay away from is I didn't read any other version of the story because I didn't want to put anyone else's voice into my own story. I went down the road of like, I guess more like researching where it came from and different versions of it. There's a version called Tailypo. There's a Native American story that is similar in theme to Tailypo, but it's not called the Tailypo. It's just kind of going down a couple of those internet rabbit holes where you find one thing and you read about another and another. And again, like I said, there are dozens of authors who have penned Tailypo stories. And I felt like the best thing for me to do was to stay away from all of that stuff because I knew what the story was. I mean, I already knew what the the bone of the story and the crux of the story was. And for my movie, it's pretty much, it's a guy basically talking to a dog the entire time.
Yeah.
And the guy that played in the movie, I'd already worked with him on another film that he was great, but I only had him for one day. And it was kind of one of those things where, like, he didn't have nearly as good a part in the previous movie for as good of an actor as he was. And so I thought, this is the guy I want to work with again. And so I started writing it, and I really had him in mind for it the whole time. And I just kept writing. And I called him one day, and I said, hey, man, I said, I want to send you something. And I said, you may think I'm crazy. I said, it's like 15 pages of you talking to a dog. And I said, just read it and tell me what you think. And he took it and called me back the next day. He's like, oh, I'm totally in. This is, for an actor, he was like, this is great because it's all me. It's all, it's like I've got to carry this entire story. So it really sinks or swims on his performance. And David Chatham, who's the actor, he's fantastic. And
he is.
He carried us, far and wide on this thing. It definitely was on his shoulders. So, yeah.
That is neat. So, are there any other stories from your childhood that you feel like have stuck with you the same way that Tailypo has?
I can't say that there's any, like, particular kind of cryptozoology story that stuck with me. There's moments, you know what I mean? Like, there's things that I saw when I was a kid, and definitely some things that I read that, like, no story really hit as hard with me. After that, it's more of like, like, I read certain books. I mean, I think everybody at a certain point, if you're about, in your mid-30s like I am, you probably read Crucible and you read The Outsiders and you read that kind of stuff, growing up. And
yeah,
it sticks with you, but at the same time, like, I always say, like, if you read, like, Kerouac's On the Road when you're 17, it makes a lot of sense, but you read it when you're 30, it maybe doesn't make as much sense. It's because it's all about the time of your life that you're at. So I don't know that there's anything, like, from back then that I really want to adapt as much as, I think it's just a matter of, like, everything I've ever seen has inspired me to do the next thing I'm going to do. So,
sure.
Like, I just made a Western recently, and I was able to go back and look at a lot of movies that I really like, a lot of stories that I really like, to kind of draw from that as far as visually. But there isn't any one thing in particular that I would say, like, oh yeah, that's something I want to take whole cloth and redo. And I don't know, it's weird because, like, I can't say that there's a whole lot of stories like Tailypo that have been told and retold again, because it doesn't belong to anybody. There is no original author to credit it to. You know what I mean? It's like it started, someone probably told it, and it was passed down a couple generations before someone started to write it down. And every version of it has a different variation, and that's pretty special in itself, I think. Whereas if you take, any other book that you read, it's hard to steer away from that because it doesn't have that same kind of, retold story quality to it.
Sure.
You can kind of reinvent it.
Yeah.
That's like, as you know, it's like anything you've ever seen adapted to a movie from a book, there's always complaints that, well, that's not how it happened in the book. You can do basically anything with Tailypo because there is no definitive version of it, committed to a book or to a movie. You say even mine. Mine is one of about a half a dozen, different versions of the movie that I know, and everyone has its own merit. And I'm sure for as many people who say, oh, we like the one that we made, you'll find somebody else who likes another one better than this one, and I totally get that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that just kind of exists out in the collective imagination, which does make it special. There's not a lot of things that that don't really belong to any one person that are like that.
And I will say, like, it has been cool, like, meeting different people, like I said earlier, who they'll come in and they'll tell you their version, or at least a rough idea. This is the version that I heard when I was a kid. And you also hear about other kind of stories in the same, like because again, I'm originally from Texas, and people are like, oh, you ever heard of the chupacabra? And I'm like, well, of course, but it's same as that. It's there's still not an oral history to it the way that there is in Tailypo.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting ones that I heard that I never heard of before is out of Louisville, Kentucky. There's a goat man called the Poplick monster, and there's a bridge. It's like a train trestle. It's called the Poplick Bridge, and apparently, if you go to this bridge at a certain time of night, there's a goat man that will throw you from the bridge, kind of thing. And again, it's like I'm the kind of person that'll go down these weird Wikipedia rabbit holes whenever someone tells me stories. And I started reading up on this thing, and I was like, man, this is a really cool monster, and it's a really cool story. And for about 5 minutes, I contemplated whether or not to do that, to tell that story. But then just the logistics of it, like I talked to some people that I know of in Louisville who were just kind of see what access was like. Because if you're going to make it, you want to make it in a real place. Because again, the difference there is like it is a place, on the planet you can walk to and you can see it. Like, this is where this story happened, as opposed to Tailypo, which can, again, when I heard it, I was in Texas. Come to find out, it's a story out of Appalachia. But again, there are so many different versions of it from different parts of America. And even, it was funny because I had a guy that, like, whenever he started playing film festivals, I guess he made a version of Tailypo after we made ours. And he got in contact with me really kind of to apologize, because he was like, hey, we just started making this movie. We didn't know about your movie. And he's like, I feel bad, like, someone's going to think that we're ripping you off. And I was like, hey, man, you don't need my permission. I was like, but if you want my blessing, you have it. I was like, absolutely, you'll tell your own story. But he was a guy out of Utah, and, they're, as far as I know, they're still working, on that version of the film. And it, like, from the stuff he showed me, it was totally different than the thing that we made. And, so, again, where he was, that was a story that it all takes place kind of in the mountains, because where he's from, that's where, that's what's around him. That's where they told the story. So,
yeah,
it's pretty neat.
That is neat. Do you ever think you'll make more folklore-based films or something of that nature?
I'm sure that I will at some point. If I don't have anything in particular that like lined up that I necessarily want to do. I did a story pretty much right after we did Tailypo. I did a H.P. Lovecraft story called The Beast in the Cave, and it follows a lot of the same ideas of just being scared of the dark, being alone, and just isolated, I guess you could say.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because it wasn't until after I made it that I kind of realized, I was like, oh, this is the same story. Like, not word perfect or anything, but like, it's just the idea of like, this guy's stuck alone in the dark. There's something there he can't see, and he's scared of it, so he kind of shoots into the darkness. Which, if you describe it like that, that describes Tailypo, and it describes this new movie. But it was after, I'd already made it, and it's a film festival that played Tailypo, also played Beast in the Cave. They played them kind of back to back, and I watched them. Watched the new movie for the first time, and I was like, oh, I just made the same movie twice, and I didn't realize it. It's funny how that works, but it's at least for me, it's like, I don't think a lot of people would look at it that way, but
you can see the commonalities.
I can see it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Lovecraft's, a lot of his stories kind of have that folklore, universal feel to them. I run into a lot of people, again, that aren't, diehard horror fans that absolutely love Lovecraft stories,
Yeah, Lovecraft's an interesting guy, man. He just developed so much mythos in a pretty short career. If you think about the idea of, it's only been 100 years ago since he was really doing what he was doing, and his career only spanned about, I think, 35 or 40 years of him actually writing. But like the things that came out of that, as far as Cthulhu and the Necronomicon, and all these different things that are staple now. It's the idea of like, you wouldn't have the Evil Dead movies if you didn't have Lovecraft. You wouldn't have, it's like all the stuff that kind of that he's responsible for without it being a direct adaptation. Like, he invented making the Book of the Dead. That's crazy. That's totally,
it is.
And I'm sure he pulled it from somewhere else too. It's like everything's recycled. So that's just the way humans are. We we take things that scare us and we rework them into something that makes sense for ourselves and our generation and put it back out there. But I think with, Lovecraft especially, that guy did a whole lot of really important work, really quickly, and I don't even think he realized the depths of which it would go after he passed.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. Lovecraft, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff that he was a weird guy. I mean, he did a lot of,
no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he, it is interesting how, it seems like his mythos and that he created, people are still, writing in that, directly saying, I'm writing a Lovecraftian, story, and you don't necessarily see that with other, writers, to the same extent that you do with him. I've recently read a book. What was it? Southern Gods. Have you ever heard of that one? Where it's like a Lovecraftian story, but it's kind of like borrows a little bit from the Robert Johnson blues legend, and it's set in the South, and has this real, blues meets Lovecraft thing going on, which is just awesome, and it's neat to see how people have kind of riffed on what he created.
Yeah, and I think that's even going to be more so in the next 10 or 20 years, because most of Lovecraft stuff I think is in the public domain now, but there's the tail end of his work that's just now falling into that, so you're seeing people kind of reinvent it and rework it, and again, it's funny because every couple of years someone does something with it that is totally brand new. Hellboy, the comic series and the movie that they did, I mean, there's so much Lovecraft in stories.
There are.
And, it's like, if you don't think about it, if you don't, look into it, but just the idea of everything that is kind of that surrounds, that whole mythos, which is, I don't know how long Hellboy's been around now, 15 or 20 years probably, but it's one of those things where, I can't imagine that exists at all if Lovecraft's not there 100 years ago doing what he did. It's funny to see how all the dots connect to get, because sometimes it's not even and I don't know that, that guy may have been hardcore reading Lovecraft, but it's just like, it's the things that get in between where you think like, oh, I didn't realize that's what I was doing until I did it. And I went back and, you can kind of, connect the dots and see, how you get from here to now.
Yeah.
Which I think is always interesting.
Yeah, the things that kind of become part of you.
Yeah.
So as I was looking at your website recently, I saw that you're working on a film about a pair of grave robbers, and it just sounded like it was right up my alley. And I was wondering what you could tell us about this project and when it will be available to watch and where and everything.
That story's called Retrieval Service, and it'll be out later this year. We shot it. We're kind of in the tail end of editing it right now. I've actually got one more night where I've got a scene where I needed a carnival, and we didn't shoot that. Last year, whenever we were shooting, we just didn't have a carnival that we could use. So we've got, it's all of maybe 5 shots that we have to do, and the carnival season's starting to kick up here in Tennessee right now. So we're probably going to do that in the next couple of weeks. And we're kind of just putting, the last little bits of edits. The guy started working on the music just last week, and so the goal there is to have it done and start the film festival runs for September and October, whenever all the Halloween stuff kicks off again. So I'd say about the end of the year, you'll start seeing it pop up. You'll see a trailer out on the internet. You'll be able to go see it at screenings, in different towns wherever they have these film festivals, and then probably sometime next year before you see it pop up on the internet where you can watch, the entire movie. But if you want to read the story, the short story version is actually out now. It's there's 2 ways you can read it. If you go to Amazon, I'm pretty sure you can look up Retrieval Service. The author's name is Larry Underwood, who's also my producing partner. And he did a whole series of, I guess this has been 2 years ago now. We kind of got finished with our TV show I was working on Tailypo, and in the meantime, he was like, I'm going to take some time off and just write short stories and and just get those published in magazines and things like that. And Retrieval Services, it was one of the first ones he did that I was like, this is really good, and we could totally make this into a movie. So he put it out on Amazon so you can download it, digitally by itself, or he put it in a collection called Tales of Parts Unknown, which is available both digitally and as a paperback. And it's got I think there are 13 stories in the book, and they're all great, but that one in particular, I thought, same as you, was right up my alley. And it's about some guys who, get into the business of robbing graves to basically get ahead. But their thinking is like, what's the use of putting valuable things into the ground? And of course, that comes back to get them later. So I'll leave it at that, on my end. But if you want to read it, absolutely go seek it out and check it out. And the movie is it's pretty close as far as the short story goes. We made a couple. The movie's got a little bit more in it than what the original short story did because we kind of filled it out for the sake of the film.
Okay.
But the bones of it are all there in the story. And if you like the story, you'll dig the movie when it comes out for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna check out that story for sure, and be keeping an eye out for the movie. But yeah. So thanks so much, Cameron, for taking the time to do the interview with us. I've certainly enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to see what you do next. I certainly enjoy your style of storytelling.
I really appreciate you taking the time. Look forward to seeing what your listeners think of the movie.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. To find out more about Cameron, go to CameronMcCasland.com. You can see more about all of his film projects there, and even watch the Tailypo movie, which is also available on YouTube. And as always, for more stories and interviews like this, check out theweeklyholler.com and sign up for our free email newsletter. You can also find The Weekly Holler on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter.